grab a beer, grab a snack, and in the front row there are some amazing seats free. Okay, great. First of all, a very, very warm welcome in the Media Lab Bavaria. I'm so happy that all of you are here. We have a fully packed house that really is amazing because today we have two amazing guests who flew all the way from New York to be here with us tonight, which is great. Some short words about us. I'm Lina. I'm running the Media Lab Bavaria together with my amazing colleagues in the back over there who helped you find your seat and find everything today. We are an incubator for media and journalism startups because I see a lot of new faces, which really is amazing, who haven't been here before. We are supporting media startups, journalism startups, and media companies in becoming more innovative. And we are doing a lot of different stuff in new technologies, how media can use new technologies, how the whole industry can become more innovative. And something I want to point out, because you find all of them on your seats, is this one, because next week we have an application deadline for our Media Startup Fellowship. So if you have a startup who is related to something with media or journalism or ed tech, for example, or education tech, please apply and work with us for 9 months. You get 50,000 euro of funding without any equity, which is a great deal, I think, which we can only have here in Bavaria because we are supported by the state of Bavaria to support you. And we would love to work with you from the first idea, from the first prototype, up to market entry, and then get some investment funding, so to really help you build your startup. And if you don't have any startup yet, you maybe find some ideas tonight to found a startup or build a startup, so you can still apply until next week, Friday. Yeah, so about tonight, what is going to happen? We have over here Alex Siegman and Kabir Seth, who are telling us what they are doing with AI in news and how they set up actually a whole center, an AI center of excellence for the Dow Jones. And they are working with the Wall Street Journal and other newsrooms on topics how to apply AI in the newsroom, what to do with AI in media. And for them and for us to get to know you a bit better, we would do a short introductory round with the famous 3 hashtag thing. So you say, because we're a lot of people, you just say your name and 3 hashtags, which goes something like this. I'm Lina. My hashtags are innovation, media startup fellowship, and chocolate. And over to you.
I'd have to say that mine are AI, philosophy, and dogs.
Hi everyone, I'm Kabir. My hashtags would be data, operations, and desserts.
Hi, I'm Berne. My hashtags are I don't really know. Political science, philosophy, and media innovation.
Hello, my name is Hans and my hashtags are electrical engineering, politics, and lasagna.
Hi, I'm George. My hashtags are media, media innovation, and drums.
Hi, I'm Donald. My hashtags are data intelligence, artificial intelligence, and big data.
I'm Marcia. My hashtags are marketing, wine, and mountain climbing.
Hi, I'm Marcus, and my hashtags are history, energy policy, and the city of Hamburg.
Hello everybody, my name is Holger and my hashtags are Berlin, events, and family.
Hi, my name is Sven. My hashtags are motorcycling, marketing, and innovation.
Hi, my name is Chris. My hashtags are data, democracy, and punk rock.
That's mean. Hi, my name is Britta. My hashtags are journalist, I don't know, digital media, and singer.
Hi, I'm Daniel. My hashtags are innovation management, the environment, and AI and data visualization.
Hi, I'm Marco. My hashtags are data, AI, and travel.
Hi, I'm Enrico. My hashtags are Synology, cryptocurrencies, and event management.
Hey, I'm Thomas, and my hashtags are news, sustainability, and politics.
Hello, my name is Hiren, and my hashtag are rock music, proof of concept, and I don't like hashtags.
Hi, my name is Mansi, and my hashtags are news, programming, and fitness.
Hi, I'm Diana. My hashtags are content, usability, and Belgian chocolate.
Hi, my name is Ferran. My hashtags are IT consultant, sports, and telecommunications.
Katja, my hashtags are media, marketing, and digital media women.
Hi, I'm Ollie. My hashtags are media, product management, and craft beer.
I'm Laura. My hashtags are journalism, pizza, and podcasts.
Hi, my name is Mira. My hashtags are radio, innovation, and salsa.
Hi, my name is Kati. My hashtags are innovations, public service, and mountains.
Hello, my name is Thomas. My hashtags are JavaScript, travel, and Munich.
That's fine. I'm Kerstin, and my hashtags are media innovation, communication, and Christmas cookies.
Hello, my name is Stefan. My hashtags are radio, media innovation, wine, beer.
Mike, technology, music, and utopia.
Hi, I'm Ralph. My hashtags are Media Lab Mentor, Innovation Ecosystem Designer, and sea kayaking all year.
No. All right, so my name is Murat Özdemir, and my hashtags are tech guy here, calm down, it's going to be all right.
Thank you. Good evening, my name is Malik. My loveliest hashtags are NFL, sport, and of course food.
Hi, my name is Ronja. My hashtags are media innovation, communication, and also crafts.
Hi, my name is Anna Maria, and my hashtags are Media Lab Bavaria, innovation, and dancing.
Hi, my name is Liz, and my hashtags are Alexa Devs, Actions on Google, IoT, and Smart Home.
Hi, my name is Christiane. My hashtags are international marketing and PR, creativity and inspiration.
Hi, my name is Daniela. My hashtags are just graduated, exploring, and CrossFit.
My name is Carl. My hashtags are curiosity, software, and Bavaria.
Hi, I'm Barbara. My hashtags are media innovation, communication, and arts.
Hi, my name is Martin. My hashtags are politics, traveling, and transformation.
Hi, my name is Adil. My hashtag is Silicon Tech, autonomous driving, and couscous.
I'm Hisham. My hashtags are branding, user experience, and my kids.
Hi, my name is Florian. My hashtags are journalism, media ethics, and the Big Lebowski.
Hi, my name is Maxime. My hashtags media planning, data analysis, and lean doesn't go. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jay. My hashtags are data, news, and visualization.
My hashtags are traveling, Marrakesh, and books. And my name is Stephanie.
Perfect. So I think we didn't forget anyone. I hope so. Okay, awesome. So the last question from me. Who of you is a programmer? Hands up. All right, that's pretty cool. So I now open the floor to our two great, amazing, fantastic guests from the US coming over here. We had already a great time yesterday with them in a workshop. And I'm very looking forward to hearing about what you're doing with AI at the Dow Jones. And don't forget, if you want to build a media startup, come to Media Lab Bavaria and take our fellowship. It's great. And now over to you. You have yours?
Are we good with the sound? Can everyone hear us okay? All right, great. Let's pull this up. Thank you also everyone for having us, and it's been, never thought I would get to come here, so it's been an amazing experience, and we're happy to be here with you all. We had a great workshop yesterday, and hopefully you enjoy this evening. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Kabir. Thank you so much, Lena, for having us here. It's been a great week. We had a great time yesterday, as Alex said. We're going to be walking through a little bit around the history of AI, delving a little bit more on what do we mean when we say AI, and then walking through some examples of AI that we have at Dow Jones, specifically at the Wall Street Journal, as well as the other portfolio companies that are part of DJ. We'll be going through what we've set up, Alex and I, at the AI Center, how it's structured, some of the design thinking that we go through, as well as some projects that we have in flight. So with that, let's get started. So kicking off a history of AI. So AI has really gone through 3 waves, and AI itself is over 50 years old. It really got kicked off. The first wave was really with Marvin Minsky in the 50s, who came up with this idea of a computer or a processor taking on problems and thinking like a human. So taking on problems that a human would normally approach and getting better. So learning really is what the focus was. And that kicked off the first wave of what became AI. And that continued then into the 70s, where you saw things like natural language processing, visual visualizations or visual reasoning. All of that came in sort of the second wave, which was then into the 70s. So you saw a massive investment, this idea, the same hype cycle that we're going through right now in AI was happening in the second wave. And what happened was, as we reached into the early 80s, investors, people who were looking to AI to change everything, started to pull their money back. So you started to see the money dry up, and AI went through what we call an AI winter. And so that winter lasted for quite a long time, and it really wasn't until we reached the early 2000s that we saw more interest in AI. And so where did that come from? There's a couple things. Smartphones, certainly saw with Siri. There was a lot of talk about how assistants in your phone were going to sort of kick off this next wave, and that's what you did see. Interest in Siri, Watson winning Jeopardy. So this was very much a consumer-led and consumer interest that kicked off the third wave of AI, which is where we are today. So certainly Siri and Watson played somewhat of a role, but really there were 3 big things that really brought on this third wave of AI, which is what we're going through right now. The first one was just the explosion of data. As I'm sure some of you know, with AI, you need a lot of data. And in our day-to-day lives, we consume and we work with a lot of data. Everything is measured. How the product is doing produces a lot of data. So all of that was sort of the first piece. We had a ton of data. The second piece that you need for AI is compute power. And compute power has become very cheap. And so that ability, we have data now and we have compute power that's not very expensive. And then the third ingredient that we need is sort of an improvement in all the algorithms. So whether it's everything from NLP to sentiment analysis to how we can now recognize a chair, we can recognize a table, all that improvement in our algorithms that drive AI. So those three things together has really brought us to where we are right now.
That's right. So I think the most common question we get is, what do we mean when we say AI? So AI is what we call a suitcase term. So depending on who you ask, when you ask them, what industry they're in, you're going to get a very different answer. So this is Kabir and I's sort of joint answer for what is AI. And we like to think of it as an overarching field of study that has lots of different subcategories throughout it. So how many people have heard of machine learning, like, with regards to AI? Okay, great. So we'll delve into that in a moment. But the other areas are robotics, rules-based AI and decision trees, any technologies dealing with speech and text, and any technologies dealing with vision. These are sort of the various capabilities that I would say, if you were looking for an overarching explanation of AI, those are probably the fields you're looking at. And what's interesting is when you look at AI in our day-to-day, so like a Netflix or Amazon recommendation engine, automated call centers, any sort of home assistants, or autonomous vehicles like drones, those all rely to some degree on probably all of these. So it's born in academia, it's moving into industry, but it's really a conglomeration of all of these different capabilities, and different products and different consumer-facing goods are going to have different inputs as far as their capabilities are concerned. So I want to take a moment and talk about machine learning in particular, because chances are, is everyone here in the media space, or at least interested in the media space, I gather, given that you're here? So if somebody's talking about AI with regards to media, they're most likely talking about machine learning, only because if you look at some of these other things like autonomous vehicles or robotics, it's probably not as applicable to media. But machine learning it lends itself well to a lot of the problems that media faces, and it's also one of the more well-founded, and it's one of the areas of AI that we're more confident in. We understand it, and it's been productionized to a relative degree. So a few examples. So again, this is our list. It's certainly not comprehensive, but hopefully it gives you a good idea as to what it means when someone's talking about AI, and in this case, machine learning. So the first real capability is regression. So I'm sure if everyone remembers from high school, you have a data set on an XY axis, and you're just trying to plot a line to find the relationship between variables. So if I have a data set that is all the houses in a zip code, and it's their square footage and their price, you can imagine that as the square footage goes up, the price of the house goes up. And so you're looking for a relationship between variables. Now, of course, you can do this with far more than two variables. It can get very complex, but it's a way to examine the relationship between variables or entities. Another area is classification. So an easy way to think about this would be if I were a doctor or a radiologist, and I wanted to know from a batch of 1,000 x-rays which of them are positive for a given diagnosis and which of them are negative. So you're trying to classify into two or more bins or buckets from a data set. Neural networks, how many people have heard of neural networks with regards to AI? Was it explained like very confusingly and very mysteriously? Okay, we'll get to that in a minute because it's really not. So hopefully we can demystify a little. Reinforcement learning, this would be, does anyone remember the AlphaGo championship? So if you were trying to teach a system to play AlphaGo or a game like chess, you have it iterate millions and millions of games, or if you were trying to train a system to do a certain task, do that task millions and millions of times, and you essentially reward it every time it makes a move towards what you've defined to be the goal, and eventually it learns to perform that task. And then lastly, supervised and unsupervised learning. So this is when someone's referencing AI in media and they're talking about machine learning, they're probably talking about supervised and unsupervised learning because, again, it lends itself to a wide variety of problems that media faces, and it's also much more well understood and well founded, and there are many more options to leverage it. So supervised learning is when you're dealing with labeled data. So if for some reason your job were to look at 1 million pictures of an apple and you have to train a system to classify whether or not the picture coming in is an apple. So, or people watch Silicon Valley, here, like the hot dog or not app. So if you can imagine, what happens is you show the computer millions of pictures of a hot dog, and you say, this is a hot dog, this is a hot dog, this is a hot dog. When it sees a hamburger, it's going to say, this is not a hot dog. And so that's what you're doing. Unsupervised learning is when you're dealing with unlabeled data. So that would be, I have a million pictures of hot dogs, a million pictures of hamburgers, and I'm asking the computer to classify it into a number of bins. So I might say, here's all of this data. What do you see? Like, what are your assumptions? How would you break this down? And it's very useful for data exploration. So perhaps you would want to use unsupervised to get an idea as to what the breakdown might be, and then generate the breakdown structures yourself and use a supervised approach. And again, these can all be used sort of in tandem. They can be used together. They can be paired. So these are, I would say, the main tenets of machine learning at their very most basic. So neural networks. So it looks confusing. It sounds confusing. I promise it's not. Mathematically, it's confusing, but as far as just grasping the premise, it's really not. So if we think about our hot dog example, for instance, each of these circles on the left-hand side are what we call nodes. And each node represents a feature. So a feature might be the size, the shape, the color. And what you do is you find ways to represent these features in your data. And your end output is going to be the label, so hot dog. And all that's happening in here is it's learning the equation to say, okay, so what's the best way I can define what a hot dog is? It might be 20% the shape, 30% the color, 10% the size, and it learns the relationship between all those features. And when you train it enough, it comes up with different weights for each of those features or each of those characteristics of the object, and it hopefully gets you to your output. And it's called a neural network because it's loosely related to how the brain processes information. So if I'm looking at this chair right now, I have different neurons firing when it sees the color, the shape, it identifies edges. The visual system works in a very, very unique and still kind of misunderstood way. But it sort of replicates that in that you have different neurons firing for different characteristics, ultimately coming together to have an output or a final decision saying this is what that is. This is a chair. So one more note, and I'm going to skip through the animations quickly. So there is, how many of you get an email, I say at least once a week from a company saying, we do AI, we can help save you money, or we can solve all your problems? Really? Okay. Okay. Check your spam folders. But so there's a lot of hype and a lot of promise as to what different vendors or third parties can do with regards to the AI capabilities. And so we want to take a moment and talk about sort of the different services that someone might provide as far as levels of abstraction are concerned. So at the very most abstract, you have programming languages like Python or R, where you're physically coding and you're interacting with the computer. You're commanding it. You're saying, go here, take this data, do something to it, and then put it here. Then you have what's called like libraries or packages, like scikit-learn, where someone has gone and taken the effort, and rather than me having to write however many lines of code to generate a neural network, someone has already done that and trained it, and I can just call a function and input my own personal data and have it outputted. Then there's offerings like Google's TensorFlow, which is an open source API, and it's based on the Python language, but it's even further abstracted. So it's allowing you to customize your own machine learning capabilities without delving that far deep into the code. Then you have platforms like Amazon SageMaker, IBM Watson, and these are closer to like plug and play options. So has anyone played with like the Google Vision API or Text API? So it's fun. If you go home, you should do it. You can put in any custom text, and it gives you the sentiment, and it tries to break out the parts of speech. Or with the Vision API, like a picture, it tells you if the person's happy or sad. And it's it's very interesting to play around with, but you can do that at scale. So again, you don't have to have the engineering resources to necessarily build this out yourself. You can use something that's already been trained. And the sacrifice there is that it's not going to be as specific to your given use case, but it's a trade-off between the cost and the engineering hours and the ultimate output. And then finally, there's cloud providers. So is everyone here familiar with what the cloud is and the cloud computing? You raise your hand if you're not. Okay, so the best way to explain cloud computing is rather than have a physical server sitting under my desk in my office in New York, I'm renting a server, I'm renting the hardware from a warehouse somewhere in Virginia or in Oregon or anywhere around the world from Google or Amazon or any number of providers, and I'm only paying for that machine when I'm using it. So it's just a change to you're renting your compute space, and it's more cost effective, it's less hassle. So some of these cloud providers like Google or Microsoft have now combined this sort of platform approach and this cloud approach so that if you're using Google, for instance, I can go ahead and I can input all of my data in the Google Cloud. I can use one of their pre-built APIs or TensorFlow. I can build something. I can transform that data. I can design a neural network and then put it back into the cloud so that it's working on any new data coming in. So it's just sort of all in one-stop shop. Now, still amazed that people aren't getting so much spam mail from vendors, but normally if someone reaches out to you and says we have a solution for all your problems, one, be hesitant, but two, they're probably in this space where they're focusing on one particular task and they've learned to automate that task. So does that make sense? All right, great. So moving on to AI at Dow Jones and what we're doing.
Right, so we have a few examples here of where we have taken some of these types of AI and applied them to our day-to-day work. So the first one we want to talk about is the paywall that we have at the Wall Street Journal. So in the past, paywalls were sort of set up in a very much a freemium way, right? So you could go to the website, you could read X number of articles, and then sort of the paywall kicked in, and you either had to be a subscriber or you were asked to subscribe before you could read any more articles. And that's exactly how the Wall Street Journal worked until we started to implement what we call our dynamic paywall. So what we wanted to do was, rather than sort of dictate the paywall based on how much content people were consuming, we wanted to sort of take the customer data and be able to determine whether or not they would likely be a customer, so how likely they would be to subscribe. And so what we needed to do was sort of balance the likelihood of subscribing and also the fact that we needed to also make advertising revenue, right? So this created we wanted to create some flexibility in the paywall. So what we did was create a model so that when someone lands on our site, if they are not logged in and they are not a subscriber, we can give them a propensity to subscribe score. So what that score is determined by is quite a few things. So those features, those factors that Alex was talking about in a neural network, the model is able to weigh and determine and look at things like how often have they visited us in the last 4 weeks? Where are they located? So we know that people who subscribe to the Wall Street Journal tend to live in high-density cities. So can we geolocate where exactly they are, or close to where they are visiting our site from? We also look at things like how likely they are to subscribe is determined by things like geolocation. Have they visited us in the last 4 weeks? What else do we look at?
Sections read.
Yeah, right. Sections read.
Time spent.
Yeah, time spent that they've been on the site. I'm trying to think. There's also another really important one that I'm forgetting. But we have some demographic information that we can also determine, and that all feeds. That's also all these features sort of feed into the propensity score. So with that, they get a different experience. So how likely they are to subscribe. So if they are a cold lead, chances are they're going to see a lot of advertising because we can then extract value that way. So they come to our site, they're not likely to subscribe, but we're going to show them a lot of ads so we get value that way. They're a warm lead or they're a hot lead. So if they're a warm lead or a hot lead, they see different experiences, and then what we've seen is this model, because it's learning, it is now, we're more likely to convert someone to a subscriber based on their propensity score. So the score continues to improve, and we're able to identify then who's likely to be a subscriber. The flip side of this is now you are a subscriber. How likely are you to leave us? So your propensity to churn. And so that is sort of like the next piece of our dynamic paywall that we're trying to figure out. Someone's come to our site, they are a subscriber. Are they, have they visited us in the last week? How likely are they to churn? Now they have a churn score. And so what can we do? What sort of user behavior can we recognize that makes someone more likely to stick around? So that might be subscribing to a newsletter, listening to a podcast, et cetera. So we're trying to determine what that behavior is and keep someone to be a subscriber.
So another example, so a quick note, so Dow Jones is a very nebulous organization. So we have the Wall Street Journal, we also have Dow Jones Media Group, which includes Market Watch and Barron's, Mansion Global, Penta, a few other sort of smaller publications, and then we have our professional information business. And that's more of a B2B, selling to companies like banks, insurance agencies, healthcare agencies. And so one of the products we sell is called risk and compliance. So if I go to a bank and I'm trying to take out a loan, and I go and I give them my name, they go into a back room and they run my name against a list of sanctioned individuals or people convicted of federal crimes to try and make sure they can do business with me. And so one product we provide is special interest persons, or SIP. And how we gather this data is, I think, fascinating. So we use a series of both AI and human input to do so. So what you can see here is, this is an article from the Belfast Telegraph. And we use some rule-based AI that we've trained to detect certain things. So what you can see here is that in the yellow, it's picked up that this is an article about an individual, John Clifford Moorhead, and it's caught the key words. So drug runner caught, cocaine, jailed, sentence, arrested, not the best association for a given name, but so the article picked up that this is a story about an individual who's been arrested for a crime that our customers usually track. So what happens is, if this were a bigger case and multiple outlets had written about it, it would recognize that. It would recognize that all these outlets are writing about the same event or the same person. It would compile them all into one place, and it puts them into a sort of profile like this. And it takes as much information as it can from the articles, from the context, but it also is surfaced in a platform. So we have a huge research team in our Barcelona office, and they go through, and every morning they open a queue, and it's basically, the AI has given them, like, I think this is somebody, can you approve this? Are there areas where you need to go and do more manual research and populate it? So it's part AI, but it's part human. We call it human in the loop. And what they're left with is these profiles with an ID that are then sold through a variety of different ways, predominantly through like an API to some of these customers. But what's really cool is, when you're at this phase, so when the researcher is sitting at their desk and they're making edits or alterations, that feedback is considered by the AI, and it's helping it learn, and it's helping it do its job better, so the next time it's giving a more appropriate recommendation.
And so the last example here we're going to talk about, we refer to it as Monty, and really what you'll find is AI opportunities that exist, not just with media companies, but with everyone, maybe internal tools that are sort of freeing up time for people to focus on different sorts of work. So this tool, Monty, is used by our sales team, and it's very basic AI that's happening here. It's very much rule-based sort of algorithm that's being used. And what we found, or what the salespeople sort of came to us with their problem, was most of the asks, the high volume sort of asks for advertising, are usually $15,000 or less. So this was a lot of work for a very little amount of money. So normally salespeople want to work on things that have high dollar values, $1 million or more. But the amount of time that it was taking to sort of evaluate and work through these $15,000 asks was too much. It didn't make sense for how much we were getting back. So we created this tool, Monty, which basically takes a request for advertising and then is able to read it and then fill in fields that normally the salesperson already would click through. So it's able to recognize what it's asking for and then go through and do some of the work already that the salesperson would do in the past. So this frees up time for them. What it's also doing is generating data so that we can then create a model in the future, take all of this data from Monty and actually find a way to apply a little higher level AI so that it could actually just read these $15,000 or less asked automatically, and now the salesperson is not focused on these, they're focused on much bigger deal.
Right. So based on everything we know, everything we've seen at Dow Jones, a quick, what is AI good at and what is it bad at? So AI is really good at identifying patterns, at making predictions, and at sort of completing these repetitive and mundane tasks. So just today, somebody asked me, what's an example? They were asking, what is automated journalism? And what I tried to explain to them is it's not one thing. It's not a technology. What usually happens is you look at all of the things that a journalist has to complete in a given day, and if you can automate or semi-automate one of those things, that's a very valuable thing because journalists are spread incredibly thin. So if you can just help them with part of their job, that's extremely valuable. Just like with our researchers in Barcelona, rather than have them having to read every news publication out there, if we can surface this information for them, we're saving them God knows how much time and effort. So that's sort of where AI today is very good at. It doesn't mean that 10 years from now that's where it's not going to improve, but today I think I can confidently say that it's good at these things. Not good at solving all problems. So I think, Lena, do we still have the stickers that say some AI will do it? So people say it oh, just have the AI do it, or have the AI fix it. It's not that simple. It's not a single technology as you saw. It's not any one thing. It's about how you're applying it and how you're leveraging it and when and where and why and the humans who are involved. So it's much more complicated than that. It needs a lot of data. It needs a lot of the right type of data. And I think most importantly and most often overlooked is it requires an adaptation to any workflow. So as you can imagine, I'm not sure what the data strategy was like before this tool, but if all of a sudden part of your job is now automated, you have to learn to now work. You have to find where else are you going to spend your time, how are you going to interact with this machine. There's also technical debts, like cloud costs or server costs, computing costs, engineering resources. So it's not as simple as saying, now we have this AI to complete some of this task for us. There's a lot of work you have to do to sort of integrate it into your organization or into your life. And then finally, it lacks explainability. So I'm sure everyone has heard horror stories about sort of AI gone bad, AI gone wrong. It's not always clear how an AI makes the decisions it's making, and it's an enormous problem that has just really serious consequences. I mean, the best example I can always think of is there was a program called Compass in the US, and it was a predictive policing algorithm. So it was the police force was limited, and they wanted to use this AI to tell them where they should send their patrol cars. But in the US, sort of the policing system is really plagued with a lot of racial profiling and history of sort of racial inequality. And so what would happen would be these police would patrol these predominantly African-American neighborhoods. And so the AI learned that there's a lot of crime in these neighborhoods because that's where the data was coming from, because that's where they were sending the people. So it would then send more police cars to these areas, and then you had overly policed neighborhoods because the AI was just learning from the human input from that data. And it was something that was not considered, but it's not like the algorithm said, just go here because, it just told them to go, and they listened to it. And I mean, there are some judges who use AI for sentencing based on historical data. So really, life and death scenarios that people are relying on AI with no idea as to how it's coming up with that decision. So it's really, it's something I think every day that people are becoming more and more aware of and trying to solve, but it's very difficult from a technical perspective to solve that. So speaking of, I think, sort of everything that goes wrong.
Sure, so I think what we found is we'll sort of get a little bit more into the center, but what we found is the challenges that we face. The first one I can talk to is sort of dismissing this silver bullet. So this is, again, your manager, your supervisor has come to you and has sort of said, like, well, can't we just use AI here? And sort of that sort of vagueness and this idea of what AI can do and what it can't do is so misunderstood. And so it's really important, if you're going to be one of the leaders in your organization focusing on AI or talking about what AI can do, it's very important that you set expectations and make clear that it is not a silver bullet. It will not solve all of our problems. There's a lot it can do, but there's also a lot it can't do.
Yeah, and another one is adapting and risk-taking. So I talked a little bit about how you have to adjust your workflow in your organization to integrate AI, but there's also, AI is still very nascent. I mean, it's been around since the 50s, but it's really just coming into its own. And so to get it right on the first time is very difficult. And a lot of larger organizations, you have revenue targets to hit, and it's not always easy to make the case to say, look, we need to, even if we fail, we need to at least try this because this is sort of the future. This is what's going to help us. And so you have to be somewhat less risk averse in order to really benefit from AI. You have to take some chances, recognize that you're going to fail a few times and that you can there's still lessons to be learned from these attempts. And as the technology gets better, you'll then be more well prepared to integrate these solutions into your organization.
I think balancing the hype, I think we've made it clear that there's a lot of hype around AI. I think it's important to be able to understand what that means and, again, what AI can and can't do.
Yeah.
So with that, Alex and I, about 8 months ago, kicked off what we call our AI Center of Excellence. And it's really built on 3 pillars. I think that's the next slide. Oh.
No. So why?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So 2 things. I think one, what Dow Jones has that not a lot of other media organizations have is we have a lot of data, not just user data, but we have our Factiva archive, which is 30 years worth of news content and markets content, not just from our publications, but from newswires and other publishers. And we wanted to know what can we do to better leverage this data. And what became clear quickly was that at this point in time, AI is really the best tool to leverage that data to really sort of produce the products that our customers find not only really valuable, but necessary to the work they do. We also noticed when we were sort of examining the state of our AI at Dow Jones that a lot of AI was considered so futuristic or so, I guess just futuristic. It was not.
It was a moonshot.
Yeah, it was a moonshot. But so the traditional rigors of product or project management, what you would normally go through to build something, weren't applied. It was more like you throw money at it and hope that you get something magical out of it. And so we wanted to address that, and we wanted to make it clear that AI is a tool, a technology, just like anything else, and you have to walk through the same processes that you would normally use to really appropriately leverage it. And then I think finally we noticed that a lot of the work was being done in silos. So like I said, we're a big company, we're very nebulous, we have lots of different teams, organizations, and everyone is working ultimately probably on the same dozen or so problems. But everyone's got different teams, different engineering resources, different data, different ways that they're trying to solve these problems. And we noticed that if we could get everybody on the same page, or at least make everyone aware of what one another were doing, we could leverage our own internal knowledge and capabilities and expertise far better and really and progress ourselves the way we wanted to. So.
Right. So with those goals, we sort of came up with the 3 pillars that sort of drive the center. And they all build on each other. The first one is just simply AI education. It's exactly what it sounds like. We want to make sure that all of our employees have a good understanding of what AI is, so going through a foundational class, walking through what we mean when we say AI, et cetera. So we're looking to make sure that our workforce and everyone who's involved with the DJ is familiar with AI. And so the second piece of this is our AI evangelists. So as Alex has mentioned, we're a very large company. And what we wanted to make sure is that within all of our business groups, we had identified at least one person who we could call an AI evangelist. What does that mean? So we want to give them a little bit more specialized training so they have a little bit more in-depth understanding of AI. And that means they can sort of take it back to their teams, and with their already understanding of their business groups, they can then apply sort of AI that makes sense for wherever they sit, whether it's marketing, whether it's on the technology side. And so these AI evangelists are identifying business problems where AI makes a lot of sense. So I have a ton of data. I think there's a possibility here that we can apply some AI. And so what we did was these evangelists are surfacing business problems, and they are then coming up with what we call AI sprints. So our AI sprints are built on design thinking, which if any of you guys are a media fellow, you will know the importance of design thinking. And so the last 5 there, empathizing, defining, ideate, prototyping, and testing, are sort of built on the Stanford D School's idea of design thinking. We added sort of the focus piece when we talk about AI because, as we've said earlier, you will be told just why can't we use AI here? And so you need to be able to focus before you can sort of get into the actual steps of design thinking. So focus is really important. So these sprints start with this framework. We had this design thinking framework. Yesterday we ran through a complete workshop of exactly what we do when we run through one of these AI sprints. And by the end of it, we sort of have a roadmap of what do the next 2 weeks look like? What are we iterating on? What are we trying to solve? And we have come to sort of an agreement on what the proposed solution would be.
And so to give you a sense, these are about 2.5, 3-hour sprints that we run during the workday, and any stakeholder involved in the given project, we ask that they be in the room so that we can get as much input and as much expertise from the different areas as we can. So we'll walk through, I think, 2 examples which should give you a good idea.
So these are both projects that are currently in flight. We've run an AI sprint against them. And the first one was, both of these come from the newsroom. The first one was around image recognition. So as some of you may know, the administration in the US is under a lot of investigation. So our investigation reporters were curious that there seemed to be a lot of players in this investigation, and there were people that sort of were famous all of a sudden, so to speak. And so what they were curious about was we know this person X, that is now important for an investigation, but do we have any pictures of this person X in our image archive? And a lot of times this picture may not be captioned, or this person wasn't famous at the moment that we took the picture of them, so they weren't recognized in our image archive. How could we take a known photo that we have now of this person who's important and run it through our image archive and identify that face, and then be able to connect who's he in a picture with? And how can that sort of help our story and sort of the investigation that we were doing? So we ran, again, we got sort of everybody in the room who cares about this. We ran through an AI sprint, and we're looking to then prototype this. We had a working prototype. Now we're looking to see how can we turn this into an actual working editorial tool for all of the newsroom.
And so another example that we ran maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago was with our Newswires team. So they've known for a while that what really differentiates the Wall Street Journal is that we can provide that context and analysis. So not just providing this is what happened, but saying this is what happened and why, or what this means for you or your portfolio. And the problem is they need to do that, but they also need to provide just a pure quantity of Newswires content coming out. So we looked at particularly press releases, and we said, we outlined the process by which they currently have to go to sort of write a story about a press release. And we said, if we can automate or semi-automate just even 1 or 2 of these different steps in the process, that's time saved that the journalist can then spend writing these more in-depth, insightful, contextual stories. And so what we're doing now is we're looking at, like we mentioned, trying to sort of put the pieces together as a company, like what all our capabilities are. So we have a team in Montreal, we have a team in Princeton, and then with a third-party provider, we're trying to see what can we do that we already have to make this easier. And if it proves that value, if this works for you, then we can take the next step and figure out how we would want to build upon this and make a more formalized product out of it. And that is it. I thought there was one more, but no.
Yeah.
So we wanted to open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you, to this great introduction.
Thank you.
We have a lot of time for questions from you now, because I know it takes some time for you to get the first question. I'm coming up with the first one, and then
Great.
you're going ahead. So, actually, why did you build up a center for AI and not for blockchain or any other hype that's out there right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think this more has to do with the fact that AI is a technology that's sort of going to, it's touching every single area of the business, and so I think it's reached a maturity stage, so it made a lot more sense for us. It's actually kind of funny, we had, I think in the summer, there was like a lot of hype around blockchain. We ran like, not we, but
we have an
company.
innovation department.
So we ran 2 or 3 workshops all focused on blockchain, and it quickly just spiraled out. But AI is something I think that's very, very different. I think grouping it with sort of the hot technology right now is the wrong thing to do. I think AI is the amount of power and sort of the things that it will be able to do. It made a lot of sense then to create a center so that we could spread it across the entire business.
Hello, my name is Hans. We are about to found a startup in the future, in the next months, and my question is, does it make sense to consider AI from the very beginning, or do we need to have a large data set before we can do the implementations as you did?
So it's a good question. I think I wouldn't go into anything assuming that AI is the answer. I would, something that we do during the design thinking is the first question you ask is who is your customer and what is the job they're trying to do and what do they need? And once you know what problem you're trying to solve for a customer, then you can look at what are the ways that you can solve that problem. And once you know how you want to do it, then you can evaluate whether or not AI makes sense, because it's easier to think of it as a tool or a technology than it is to think about as this mystical, magical being that you're implementing. Now, granted, there is some value in having AI in your name as a startup. I mean, if you're trying to secure funding, to be honest, but realistically speaking, I wouldn't go into it saying we need to use AI. Only use it if if it makes sense to use it.
Yeah, I think it's like the thing Alex said about it's a technology, it's a tool. It's the same thing, like you think about like Microsoft Excel, right? Like you wouldn't sort of be like, well, we need to write this document, but we have to use Excel. Like we need to use Excel. Like you wouldn't sort of like get obsessed with using Excel for the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So you start with the business problem, and then sort of the tool should follow.
Okay,
good luck.
Just a question. Do the journalists also buy into this in terms of getting stats, in terms of who's reading the articles or what content is popular and stuff like that?
Well,
they're obsessed with it.
Yeah. I mean, our Wall Street Journal newsroom is like 1,300 people, right? So it depends on the journalist. Like there are plenty of journalists who are like, you know, why aren't we the highest in the SEO? Like we were the first in there. Why is my story not hitting? Like how many people read this? Yeah, there are plenty of journalists that care about it. And then there are some journalists who are like, you know, they'll read it. It's there. So it definitely varies. But I think we have a dedicated audience team that is constantly supplying information about who's reading this, what sort of headlines work, all of that sort of information.
What was your core team disciplines when you were starting AI?
So we are the core team.
Yeah.
So like I said, we started this about 8 or 9 months ago. My background, so my studies were it was called philosophy, neuroscience, and psychology. So it was basically pre-med for students who are bad at science. It was more humanities-based. And then I got my master's in journalism before joining the Wall Street Journal and then Dow Jones. So I took a very roundabout way of getting here, but I think all things considered, it was really the best thing I could have done because I came in understanding different bits and pieces and being able to understand the business needs, the human needs, ethical concerns, everything else around AI that really makes it what it is, rather than coming in with just one particular mindset, one particular focus.
Yeah, so my background is mostly in product and operations, but our engineering team sort of, they have a background in have been at sort of the cutting edge of AI for a while. So what you saw with our paywall, for instance, we have a data science team that built that out, that created the model, that applied it. And the same thing with Monty, sort of we had in-house developers who understood how to apply AI automation. So the skill sets that we've had sort of existed within the business already, and then Alex and I were sort of finding ways to make sure that these things sort of didn't sit in silos, and we could then apply the things that we've already built to other business problems.
And that's why education was the first pillar, because recognizing that the cost to hire an ML PhD is immense, not to mention their time is, they only have so much time to focus. But if we could educate and sort of amplify our existing resources, our existing engineers, our existing business people, and help them understand sort of the possibilities for AI, and also give them some of the tools to be able to program them, or open source libraries, anything we could do to help them augment their work, that was the clear winning solution. And so that's what we're really trying to do, is we're trying to bring everybody up to speed with at least the foundations, or the basics of AI, normally splitting into sort of two tracks, technical and non-technical.
Sure.
Do you want to take the first one?
Yeah. So the first question is sort of how do you differentiate between the AI center and sort of just being a data analytics? So I think the pieces that we sort of talked about, the AI education piece, or the idea that we want to educate everyone around AI, that was an important piece. And then the evangelists were sort of something that we weren't looking then, it was a case where rather than sort of having AI sit just in technology and be thought of as sort of like a technology thing, we wanted to make sure that it sat with all of the business units. So marketing should care about this, HR should care about this, sales should care about this, and that's the evangelist's job. You're sitting in sort of this business unit, you have a day-to-day responsibility, but AI is going to touch you in some way. So it's really important that you understand it, and then you can apply it and teach the rest of your team and sort of get them smart on it as well. So those two pieces of it, sort of the education and the evangelist, really separated it then from like, this is a data unit, give it data, and then have it do some analytics that will then come back to the company. We made it very clear that the center was for all of Dow Jones, and that it wouldn't sit in sort of this silo where it would be fed data or have some sort of resources that were then going to do some work behind it. So does that answer your question? Okay. And the second piece of that?
So the future of algorithms and AI. So I have sort of not strong feelings, but I have strong thoughts about this. So I think that the future of algorithms and AI depends on the customer need and the public. So in my mind, when you look at what AI is strong at today, a lot of that is because those are the needs that the public has voiced. And so therefore academia and a lot of private companies and even public companies put all of their efforts into solving those problems, and thus they generate the technologies to solve those problems. And then you have these companies like autonomous vehicles. if nobody cared about autonomous vehicles, computer vision would probably be nothing like what it is today. So it really depends on what the public wants and what customers are asking for. And that's going to drive the technology, because even academia, like grant money and funding, everyone's trying to really better society or make money from society. And so what technologies they pursue, what algorithms they build, depends on what problems they're trying to solve. And it's really up to us as a public to tell them what problems need to be solved. With the algo storyteller. Oh, so that let's see if I can go back. So this one. So what happens now is, so the Newswire's team, they have this whole process whereby a press release comes through the system and the journalist has to write a story about it. So maybe it's a merger and acquisition, a press release about a merger, and they need to write about it, and they also need to write not just what happened, but why is it important, what does it mean, what does it say about the economy, and they need to use their expertise to delve into those details. But it's a very tedious process going between different systems, finding the press releases, knowing which ones to look at, knowing where, and it might be a 50-page press release, knowing where to look. And if we can eliminate any of those pains or any of that time, so whether it be, I mean, some of the things we explored were like just prioritizing which press releases to read first, or highlighting in the press release sort of the key facts and figures, anything we can do to save them time, because that's the pain, is the time spent doing it, the better off they are. So that's how we're sort of looking at augmented storytelling or journalism. And there's other groups at the company who are looking at completely different areas, but for us at least, that's the approach that we're taking.
Right, so the idea is not to sort of take the journalists out of the loop completely, right? Like their capabilities and strengths are in those insights, being able to sort of identify why, what does this merger mean? Why should you care about it? How does this connect to sort of a merger that's been happening maybe in the entire industry? So that's what we want the journalists to focus on, right? Being able to sort of write a headline and then re-summarize what this press release is saying is sort of not what they want to be focusing on either. So if we can get the AI at that piece where it's automating the headline and automating the context, and they're focusing on the insight, now you sort of have a strong system.
Hi. Okay. So you mentioned that both of you don't really have a computer science background, right? So my question is, do you think in-house developer expertise is important, or do you hire external companies? I mean, you mentioned a bit about it, but as you said, machine learning PhDs and developers are super expensive. So how important is it to have that in-house? And the second part of that question is, do you also want to contribute to research in the field like Google and Microsoft do, or are you really just doing in-house work for your own teams?
Go ahead. So I think one thing, so I'm always of the belief that the better you can understand the technology, the better you can apply it to a business. So I take courses, and after I finish journalism, trying to understand the technical and programming itself so that I can better understand and better speak with the engineers and translate and know what's possible, what's not possible. So I think that's a valuable skill for anyone in the media industry to have, even if it's just a better understanding Excel or just any sort of data skills or data analysis that you can learn. I think it's very valuable because the world is just becoming quantified. There's an influx of content and data, not just numerically, but text data. And if you can sift through that to find what you need and then sort of redistribute it to your readers or your viewers or your listeners, that's a very valuable thing. And then as far as in-house or going out, have you heard the build, borrow, buy dilemma? So do you build it yourself? Do you rent some of it, or do you buy another company? And it really depends on the problem that we're trying to solve and the resources and funds that we have. I think most people would agree that if you can build it yourself, you should, because it's nice to have. But
I think at the end of the day, if Google is hiring 20,000 data scientists, right? We are not going to be able to compete with that, right? So we would probably look at ways that we would partner with Google and partner with Amazon so that, you know, some of those platforms that, that we talked about, we could just sort of build our solutions on that. So I think, you know, we make those decisions, you know, based on the problem that we're faced with, but we aren't certainly trying. I don't think, if my CTO is standing here right now, I don't think he would say that we are trying to compete with Google and Amazon on hiring sort of PhDs or any sort of piece of that. I think what you will see is that as this center sort of grows and expands and these solutions are not just siloed in certain business areas, you will start to see our publications sort of then reach out to the rest of the media world. So we might not be doing, you know, research on deep thinking, but we may be saying, like, look, these are the things we came up with for recommendations and for personalization that makes sense in the media world.
You mentioned a little bit about your backgrounds in terms of what you studied. And I'm looking at a long Christmas break, and I have kind of a two-part question. One, yeah, I'm playing with computer vision and Google Cloud, and it takes quite a bit of time, though, to get certified, to be really good at something. So I'm kind of interested in what you would recommend, number one, for AI. Learning track, complete with software, if Python and Node.js are sufficient, or if there's something else. And the second part of the question was, I was more interested in digging into a little bit of what your technology stacks look like. If you borrow from some and take from others and make your own, what's the mix look like?
Sure. So I mean, I would say Python makes sense, but I think Alex,
yeah, I mean, so I use a lot of both free resources and paid resources. I'm happy to talk with you after and give sort of some specific names, but it's very difficult to be an expert at anything, especially in AI, where it's such a rapidly growing field, and it's really hard to just pick one thing. So it's good that, like, computer vision, you know what you're interested in. You're not saying, I'm just interested in AI. So it makes it much easier to sort of narrow in. But I think it still depends on the industry you're in and what you're looking to get out of it. So meaning if you're looking to become a computer vision an engineer, it's probably different than if you're looking to understand the overarching principles of computer vision as they apply to the business problem. So there's, again, this technical and non-technical track, and depending on what you're trying to pursue, it's really two different courses of study or two different resources. And then for the latter question, for like our stack.
Yeah, so a lot of our applications are built on AWS. If any of you saw the Ignite conference was it last week, 2 weeks ago, we had quite a few presentations and sort of security, sort of our cloud process that's been going on now for 2 or 3 years. So nearly all of our applications now have moved to the cloud. And so a good amount run on AWS. We also have some on Google Cloud as well. So we sort of put our eggs in both baskets there. Yeah, our web stack is Node. We use Node for that. I don't know if I'm giving away any trade secrets here, but yeah.
No, I'm not saying we work with third parties. We build some stuff. We borrow some stuff. We buy some stuff. We use everything in our arsenal to really get the job done, and we do it on a problem by. We don't have any exclusive contract with any one group or cloud provider. It's really what does the given problem ask for, where is the data being stored, and what makes the most sense, and that's what we pursue. And like I said, if we can build it ourselves, that's always preferable, but it just doesn't always make sense, either sort of time or financially or even just from a tech stack perspective.
So, first of all, thank you for the presentation. I mean, this is actually really good to see that, you know, like many of these theoretical concepts finally being applied in the real world, and then, you know, like, and then also just getting structured and, you know, finding their places in the world. So that's good. But at the same time, we are actually kind of running into a problem of, you know, like losing the very basic skills. I mean, so then, you know, like once you're actually, like once you're actually starting to use more and more AI tools in a journalism setting, then you're actually kind of making the entry-level journalist jobs more and more obsolete. I mean, even like useless. So then at that point, I mean, you know, your current experienced journalists will age at one day, and then, you know, like they will have to retire. And then, you know, so, you know, like if you actually see this as a, from my general ideas, you know, like do you actually see this as a problem, or do you have any solutions to, you know,
Right.
put this fire?
So it sounds like you're saying that because we'll automate sort of these jobs, or I guess these tasks that were normally done by entry-level journalists, then they won't know how to do those tasks, and therefore when the experienced journalists, is that, yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I totally follow that line of logic, right? Because if the task that the entry-level journalist would normally do is now automated, now just the task that the entry-level journalist is being asked to do will be different, right? So that is sort of the difference is that we don't stop hiring entry-level journalists. It's just what we ask them to do is different. I mean, the same way when we had Excel, when Excel was introduced, right, and we were able to automate formulas that the entry-level person had to do by hand, we were now asking the entry-level accountant to do something else, right? It wasn't like we stopped hiring the entry-level accountant.
But I think if you're asking, like, do the entry level, does it mean a new skill set and like a new training? I think the answer is yes. So when I graduated with my master's in journalism from Columbia, and the year that I started, they instituted a data journalism master's of science, a whole new program trying to train this future of journalists with data skills. Because like I mentioned, the world is becoming quantified, and you have this influx of data, and the best example is like the Panama Papers. There's a lot of technology and AI using to sift through all of that content, and that's where at least I see the future of journalism. And I think if I could give any advice to any journalist out there is bolster your data skills and your sort of technology skills, because you're going to be asked to do those things. Kind of like maybe a few years ago, it was they would tell you you need to learn to take photos and shoot video because every reporter is going to have to go on their own after budget cuts, and they're going to have to be the reporter, they're going to have to be the photographer and the videographer. Now it's that plus data, so it's a new skill set that's sort of being required. Great.
More questions? Yes.
More a general question. Do you think in the future there will be like a few big AI providers or a bunch of smaller ones? Like the winner takes it all or not?
That sounds like a capitalism question.
I mean, right now, if you ask me right now, if things sort of remain the same and sort of the